FMCSA relaxes rules to help drivers get CDLs. This article that I'm going to read to you real quick was just uploaded December 17th, 2020, and it's talking about more changes that are being made to the process of a new driver or an individual getting their CDL. So I want to read this to you because this outlines more changes other than the ones that I pointed out last week on my channel. So here we go. Federal regulators issued a final rule Thursday, just the other day, to make it easier to obtain a commercial driver's license, despite concerns that the change could open the door to CDL training fraud. The rule based on a proposal issued in June 2019 was initiated after complaints that the current standards for knowledge and skills testing were too restrictive. The final rule eliminates a requirement prohibiting a third-party CDL skills instructor who is authorized to administer the CDL skills test from performing both the instruction and the qualifying testing for the same CDL applicant. I'm gonna read that paragraph one more time just in case you didn't understand it. The rule, based on a proposal issued in June 2019, was initiated after complaints that the current standards for knowledge and skills testing were too restrictive. The final rule eliminates a requirement prohibiting a third-party CDL skills instructor who is authorized to administer the CDL skills test from performing both the instruction and the qualifying testing for the same CDL applicant. So that used to not be able to be done, but now this new rule allows for that to be done. And these changes are being made to hopefully make it easier for an individual to come in and go through the process of getting their CDL. Individual states, at their discretion, can now allow qualified third-party skills trainers to also conduct the skills testing for the same person. During the COVID-19 public health emergency, truckers have been American heroes, and the department is committed to helping our economy by reducing unnecessary barriers for those interested in obtaining jobs in the trucking industry, commented U.S. Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao in announcing the rule. That's interesting how they worded that a second ago. During the COVID-19 public health emergency, truckers have been American heroes, and the department is committed to helping our economy by reducing unnecessary barriers for those interested in obtaining jobs in the trucking industry. So obviously this individual, Elaine Chao, the Secretary of Transportation, feels like the current process of getting your CDL is obviously, she feels that it is riddled with, I'm gonna use the same words that she used, that it is riddled with unnecessary barriers. Okay, that's how they feel right now. I can't say I necessarily agree with that. And there are others that probably would say that the industry needs to have more barriers set on the individuals that want to come in. But anyway, let's continue reading this article. Under Secretary Chao's leadership, the Trump administration has continued to examine ways to provide common sense regulatory reform and help individuals seeking to enter the commercial driver industry, said Wiley Deck, Deputy Administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So Trump is trying to roll back more regulations. This new rule will provide states more flexibility during the ongoing public health emergency to test CDL applicants and allow more drivers to safely enter the industry. So not only are CDL applicants hurting right now because of the current process of getting the CDL being too cumbersome, not only are individual CDL applicants hurting from that cumbersome process, but also trucking companies and other people that are in the industry are also hurting from this as well. You got to remember, the trucking industry is already facing a driver shortage. So the reason that these changes are being made is, one, to make it easier for the individual to get a CDL, and two, to get more truckers in the industry to be able to help the trucking industry overall. FMCSA acknowledged in the final rule that most of the comments it received from individuals opposed the plan, citing concerns about fraud, conflict of interest, or examiner bias. And I totally get that. There have been owners of trucking schools that have already been prosecuted for CDL testing fraud. Basically, taking money from the students to pass them, or taking money from some individual in order to pass this student. Okay, so there are individuals that are saying that these new changes will open up the doors to more of that type of fraud, which has already been going on before these changes are taking place. The Truckload Carriers Association, for example, which generally supported the rule change, cautioned that enforcement will be necessary to eliminate the possibility for fraud by bad actors who simply want to profit monetarily from the new regulatory flexibility. Makes sense. But the TCA, the Truckload Carriers Association, also cited data in support of the change, which showed that drivers in 2016 seeking initial CDL skills tests and retests experienced over 6.4 million days of delays. That resulted in 258,000 plus driver and other jobs being placed on hold and 1.5 billion in foregone wages. So essentially what these last two paragraphs are saying is that the Truckload Carriers Association has basically noted that, you know, with this new program, you guys are going to have some sort of enforcement in place to make sure that people don't abuse these rules. And the same company also says, hey, as a result of what happened in 2016, the numbers that I just mentioned to you, this is basically proof that the rules that are out right now are too stringent, basically. So I guess basically they're kind of saying that the TCA, the Truckload Carriers Association, they're kind of on both sides of the fence. On one note, they're saying, hey, if you're going to do this, expect people to try to defraud the system. But on the other hand, they're also saying, hey, you need to do this because the process right now is so cumbersome that it's causing a blockage in the industry. FMCSA responded to those opposing lifting the restrictions by stating that the agency continues to believe that lifting the restriction will not diminish highway safety. So it should make sense, because if the rules governing getting a CDL are relaxed, then you could make the point that there will be drivers on the road driving trucks that shouldn't be, okay? And so the FMCSA responded to the people that are making that claim by stating that lifting the restrictions, by stating that they believe that lifting these restrictions will not diminish highway safety. I don't know how they could come to that conclusion. If they're making it easier for drivers to get a CDL and get behind the wheel, it makes sense that that one move could potentially diminish highway safety. Extensive requirements and resources are currently in place to help FMCSA and the states maintain the integrity of the process and identify irregularities or fraud in skills testing. The final rule goes into effect 60 days after it is published in the Federal Register. Now, you hear what I just shared with you in that article. I have one more article that I want to share with you, a short article, and this next article that I want to share with you basically contradicts, in a certain sense, the first article that I just now read to you. And this second article that I'm going to go into is titled "Analysts See Little Change in Capacity from New CDL Rule." So this next article that I'm going to read to you basically says, you know what, man, all of these changes that these people are making to make the process easier and to get people through the process of getting their CDL and to get more drivers out in the industry, all of these changes that are being made is not going to help that any, okay? So this is also a short article, and this one right here was uploaded Monday, December 28th, just yesterday. So these rule changes and the opinions on these rule changes are very new, okay? So let's read this article. I want to share this article with you really quick. Analysts see little change in capacity from new CDL rule. The subtitle is "Rule Allowing Instruction Testing by Same Party Not Likely to Alter Tight Truck Supply." Again, they're basically saying in this article that all of these relaxed regulations still not going to help the situation any, okay? So here's the article. Some analysts don't believe an easing of instruction and testing rules for issuing commercial driver's license will meaningfully change the current tight supply dynamic that exists in trucking. Federal regulators recently issued a final rule allowing a third-party skills instructor to administer both instruction and qualifying testing to the same driver applicant. Previously, both functions could not be performed by the same instructor for one candidate. States will now have the discretion to decide whether they will allow qualified third-party trainers to complete both functions. The proposal to change the rule was undertaken in 2019 following complaints that the process was too cumbersome. That's what I just read you in the other article. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration said the change will reduce testing delays and costs and improve the turnaround time for licensing. That's what the FMCSA says. Data from the Truckload Carriers Association shows the requirement for the separation of duties was a contributor to the equivalent of 6.4 million in testing delay days, more than 250,000 jobs being placed on hold, and 1.5 billion in lost wages during 2016. Again, I just read that for you in the other article that I just read. In a note to clients, Morgan Stanley analyst Ravi Shankar said, the rule may relieve an operational restriction hindering some CDL applicants, but noted larger headwinds to capacity like the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, low driver school enrollment, and insurance costs outweigh the move. So even though this move is being made, these other things that this person brought up, Ravi Shankar, the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, low driver school enrollment, and insurance costs, these are other barriers that drivers that are just coming into industry or drivers that are in the industry are also going to have to deal with. And so he's basically saying that these changes that are being made are not really gonna help anything. It's not really gonna change anything because these drivers still have other issues that they have to deal with, such as the ones I just laid out for you. A move like this, and this is a continued quote from Ravi Shankar, a move like this may help to ease on the margin, but ultimately we do not believe this will have a significant impact on the supply side and don't expect a flood to the market with new commercial driver's licenses, Shankar continued. Deutsche Bank's Amit Mehrotra said, we view this as a positive for carriers to expand the pool of qualified drivers, offsetting the current wage inflation, and in turn relieving some margin pressure. He continued, and in turn relieving some margin pressure. He continued by saying any addition of incremental capacity would be a negative to supply-demand balance, but he doesn't believe the change will be overly impactful. As COVID-related demand has prompted the continuous need for and restocking of retail consumables and household goods, the need for truck capacity has surged. However, capacity has contracted largely due to declines in the number of qualified drivers. CDL issuances have been reduced by more than 100,000, and only 10% of the 46,000 drivers with drug and alcohol violations have returned to duty. Those opposed to changing the rules cited concerns around fraud, conflicts of interest, and bias on the part of the examiner, which I totally understand. A 2013 change to the rule gave driver schools the ability to provide testing and training, but not by the same instructor as a means of preventing fraud. So now they just overturned that rule, okay? Removing the restriction is expected to reduce skills testing delays and thereby allow drivers to obtain gainful employment sooner, according to the FMCSA. In addition, the increased efficiency in skills testing will benefit third-party testers and CDL applicants by reducing the time and cost spent to complete skills testing. FMCSA believes this change will not undermine the integrity or effectiveness of CDL skills testing. The rule will be effective following a 60-day period after the date of publication in the Federal Register. Now, I want to read you two comments that are on this post right here, because according to the FMCSA, they don't believe that these changes will compromise safety on the road or will compromise the ability of new drivers to come out here and stay safe while they're driving, okay? But I want to read you two comments on this post that are really thought-provoking. The first one is from Joe DiTullio, and the only reason I'm reading this out is because it's public information anyway, okay? This was actually just posted this morning actually, just 6:04 a.m., just a few hours ago. And here's his comment in response to the article I just read. How about the government and in turn the trucking industry stop, maybe I shouldn't be reading this, stop viewing marijuana, a plant, an herb, a spice, as a drug that should remain illegal and a bar to legally obtaining and holding a CDL. That's an idea that I can absolutely guarantee will get you a ton of potential driver candidates. If a trucker can end his shift and go home and enjoy a few alcoholic beverages, why can't that same guy replace the beer with a bowl of weed? Enough of the government control nonsense already. Stop controlling people and telling them what they can and cannot do, and I bet you'll be a lot happier with the results you get. No one likes to be told what to do in life, and especially when it's nonsensical and hypocritical. One life to live. So this gentleman is just has a beef with the weed thing. This next gentleman, Steve Gingler, has a really interesting comment. He says, "This is ridiculous. I've been driving for 20 years. The drivers out here now can't drive safely as it is. Yesterday alone, I watched a driver. Yes, I timed him. Over 20 minutes to back in a dock door where there was no other trucks. The FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carriers Administration, needs to tighten restrictions and make training more structured to make drivers and other vehicles on the road safer. Last month, I had to help a driver who couldn't speak English back his truck in a door because they couldn't do it. Nothing wrong with not being able to speak English, but you got to be able to back your own truck up, okay? These drivers shouldn't have a CDL. Please let's make training stricter, safer, and more structured." So on one hand, you have federal agencies that feel like they are listening to the trucking industry, and that's why they are relaxing the standards as far as passing the CDL test and getting your CDL and coming into the industry. So on one note, you got federal entities that feel like they are listening to the industry, so they're relaxing the standards. But here you have a driver saying, you're not listening. You need to tighten the standards because there are a lot of drivers out here on the road now that really don't need to be out here. So there seems to be really two arguments to this. There are those that are okay with making the process or making the procedure of a person coming in and getting their CDL easier, simpler, and less stringent. There are those of us and those of you that are in favor of that, but the other side of that is if it's easier for a driver to get a CDL, if it's simpler, if it's less stringent for a driver to get a CDL, that could result in more accidents on the highway. That could result in more people getting behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler that's loaded at 80,000 pounds and driving it down the road and not knowing what they're doing. So to me, this is a really, really interesting development. And there's a few things that you should get from this. One, the same point that I made the other day. 2021 is no time to fail your CDL test. There's a lot of changes going on right now, and the best way to do it is to be prepared when you go in there, whether you go to the DMV or to a school. Be prepared as you can to take your test and pass it the first time, okay? Because you don't want to get mixed up in all of this mess, okay? And another thing that you can easily get from this as according to this article, a lot of changes are being made, but they ain't gonna help nothing. They're not gonna help anything. They're not gonna alleviate the problem, and they're not really gonna put more drivers on the road anyway. Okay, so let me know what you think. As a driver, most of the people here that are on my channel are actually drivers or seeking to become drivers. Okay, so if you're a driver, how do you feel about it being made easier for a driver to get a CDL and get behind the wheel of a truck? And if you're a person coming into the industry, how do you feel about them making it easier for you to come into the industry and get a CDL? Do me a favor, leave your comments below down in the comment section. I would love to know what you guys think about that. But I just wanted to read you those two articles just to outline very recent changes to the CDL process, changes that are just coming about in the last few days. So I hope you guys got some value from this video. If you did, be sure to go below and give me a like. If you're subscribed already, stay close to the channel. Got a lot of good, helpful content coming down the pipe for you guys. And if you haven't subscribed already, what the heck are you waiting for? Click the subscribe button. That way you'll be notified when I upload more helpful content.